Hello everyone and welcome to another video from Gun Gamers. My name is Eric and today we're finally doing it. We're talking about and geeking out about my favorite airsoft light machine gun that is also probably the worst light machine gun in my collection. We're talking about the LCT RPD. So those of you who know anything about the LCT RPD know that this is a kind of expensive and hard to find gun normally, unless you're like me and you get really lucky. I was actually at my local field with Kyle and a couple other members of Gun Gamers, and this RPD pre-shopping, it was full length at the time, was on the consignment wall, being sold for about $350 because the prior owner had some kind of gearbox issue they couldn't fix and they just wanted to get rid of the thing. Well, we buy it and we take it to the parking lot and I take a look at it, and it turns out that the motor height was bad. So one fixed motor height later and we had a fully functional LCT RPD for $350. So this is not going to be an objective review keeping the price in mind. So if you're asking me if this gun is worth $900+, my answer is going to be no, unless you really want it. But is it worth the $350? I feel a lot less salty about that, so yes. This was originally adopted in 1948. Technically, I think 1944 was when the design was finalized, but then they were mostly made throughout the 1950s until eventually the RPK replaced it as the preferred squad automatic weapon for the Soviet Union once the AK had been ironed out. But I think the real nail in the RPD's coffin for any use with the Soviet Union is that the PK came out in 1961. And yeah, that gun kind of changed the game, huh? So there wasn't all that much room in the Soviet arsenal for this thing. China still produced it and used it for a while. A lot of them have shown up in Vietnam, African conflicts. They're still made. I think North Korea actually still makes these, but it's kind of a weird gun. In many ways, it was a very early revolutionary concept of an intermediate cartridge belt-fed squad automatic weapon. It's kind of the concept of the M249 before the M249, and it was among the earliest of that to be done. It's just that then the Soviets decided they liked the RPK better. Now, some of the more famous people to have used the RPD, especially in this chopped configuration, are going to be your MAC v SOG operators during Vietnam. And then there was also some use of the chopped RPD by the Celis Scouts and other participants in the Rhodesian Bush War. But if you talk about that war for more than 15 seconds, all the weirdos come out, so we're gonna move right along. But I like the look of the chopped RPD. I think it is a really cool example of people kind of kludging enemy captured equipment into something that's a little bit more useful than its original form. Because I gotta tell you, full length, the RPD kind of sucks. It's really front heavy, and you basically can't shoulder fire it, and carrying it is miserable because it's so unbalanced. The RPK definitely balances out better, especially in airsoft use, and that's obviously what we're talking about now. So make no mistake, the LCT RPD, especially with the extra like 6 or so inches of barrel and the bipod on here, is a very heavy gun. I would actually say it's easier to carry a PKM for a full weekend game than it is to carry this RPD. Now that it's chopped, it's a lot easier and it's a lot more like, I would say this is more equivalent to carrying something like an M249 now. But with how front heavy it was with that extra 4 to 6 inches of steel and the steel bipod, I would actually say this was worse than carrying an M249, and it was so long. Now, if you've used an RPK, the RPK 74 and the base RPK have the same issue. The RPK 16 is obviously quite short, and now I would say this is much more in line with something like an RPK 16 for overall length, but the bulk still makes it feel like something closer to a saw. That said, so much of that weight comes from the build quality. This gun is really well made. It's all steel. Everything that is an external part, everything that should be steel, from what I can tell, is all steel. And it's nicely finished. This gun has been to games in the rain. I've sweat all over this gun. I've beat it up. I've not been nice to it. And the finish still is holding up very nicely. It's almost like it's finished closer to a real firearm because it costs closer to what a real firearm would cost to make. The wood is not bad. Honestly, it's about what I expect from, high-end airsoft wood. It's fine. It's probably pretty similar to what the Soviets were using when they were building these originally. But it does not rattle anywhere. There is just a ridiculous overbuilt quality to this gun. I do not think you can break any part of this gun externally. And threading the flash hider and chopping the barrel required some pretty serious tools. So if you want to chop this thing on your own, you're going to do some work, okay? So it is a behemoth. So yeah, I guess that's what $900 gets you. Now, that's all well and good. Everything I've just said basically applies to any really well-made model gun. But how does it work as a skirmishable airsoft gun? How does it compare to other machine gun competitors, many of which are half the price? And the answer is, to be honest, kind of poorly. If you are familiar with LCT AEGs, you are familiar with how this performs. It's got a weird looking gearbox setup crammed in here, and it's got a weird MOSFET in the stock, but this is just your bog standard LCT in terms of how it actually shoots and performs. Pretty average. Chronoed in with the stock spring right around like 1.3 joules, especially once we had to try to crank the hop up for heavy BBs, but it's fine. It's got like a 14 or 15 round a second rate of fire on a 7.4 volt LiPo, and on an 11.1 volt LiPo, it's got just enough rate of fire that it does not feed from the drum magazine for more than 1 second, if that, no matter what we do. This is definitely similar to if you were trying to run an RPK on a kind of jank drum magazine, if you want something that I can compare to. And if you buy a Cyma RPK and a Cyma drum magazine, I think you have equally as good or better of a light machine gun for $300. Whereas this is that type of package, just in this really nice body. I will say, reliability has been very good. Because I can only run it on 7.4 volt LiPos, because the drum magazine doesn't keep up with anything faster, it just chugs along and it doesn't die, especially only running at 1.3 joules. Easy work. So that is very nice. I like that I can grab this and bring it out to 40-hour games and bring it out to long-form events and be confident that the piston is probably not going to eat itself and a gear is not going to strip. It is basic but robust internally, is what I would say. The main internal modifications I've had to make have to do with the hop-up and the MOSFET in the stock. Now, the first thing I did, obviously, is I rewired the gun to Dean's, but then the hop-up, I initially had put a G&G green bucking in there. I recently wore that out at a game that I shot this thing too much at, but, that's fine. But I have a Maple Leaf MR hop now in there, which is much nicer than the stock hop-up setup. The stock hop-up, we were able to, kind of get 3.2s into, but it stopped hopping those pretty quick and wore out. The hop-up design is fine. It's got a decent range of adjustment if you know how to tune the bucking and nub combo that you're putting in there for the weight of BBs you're planning to use, but it's not amazing. The feeding from the magazine is, I would say, by far the biggest performance issue for this gun, and the reason for that is because the magazine is a totally self-contained unit. It's basically a big high cap in this drum. It's got its own batteries that it runs off of. I think it runs off of AA's. You just wind it with this little button on the bottom here that I've covered with a piece of electrical tape so it doesn't have a weird red button sticking out. And you just fill it through this little flap here, and you can do that while it's in the gun, which is pretty convenient for in-the-field reloads. But it's a totally self-contained unit, and that means you're basically just winding a high cap. Now, you're winding this high cap and it achieves this maximum tension of what it will feed all at once, but then you have this feed tube going from where the magazine locks in up to the hop up. And that probably doesn't make for the smoothest feed. So the only way that you can continuously feed for a long time from this drum magazine is if you hold down that button while you're shooting. There is no trigger mechanism that winds the magazine while you're shooting. There is no external remote button anywhere. There's not even a sound winding option, for those of you who remember when that was the meme. But there's just a big high cap and you have to hold the bottom of it and keep on shooting while you're winding. And yeah, granted, you can just hip fire the thing while you're holding the drum, and that looks pretty cool, to be honest. But it does mean that as far as it compares to other airsoft machine gun options, this compares pretty poorly in terms of convenience and performance. And the best way to fix that would probably be to get a new drum magazine insert or figure out a way to wire it into this whole thing. But you can't get spare LCT RPD drum magazines. Nowhere really sells them that I can find, at least not anywhere that I've ever seen in stock in the last few years. So I can't replace this if I mess it up. You understand my position on not wanting to heavily modify something that I can't replace if I mess it up. So I don't know, I might have to send this thing off to a tech, see if someone else can do a better custom job with this drum magazine than I'm confident in attempting. But for now, I still really like this gun, even though it's got all of those problems, right? Even though I say, it's only got so much rate of fire that I can only run to keep up with this drum magazine because it doesn't feed great, and I've had to replace the hop up a couple of times because I've gotten way too excited and shot it too much. But that latter one is just the fault of how much I like this gun, even though it's super jank. And that just comes down to the fun factor and the aesthetic and how cool it is. I threaded the barrel for a tracer unit and I mounted a flashlight on here for a 40-hour game I recently went to, and I thought that was super fun. I thought that made for a really nice configuration to play with. I held down the trigger on this thing for at least 2 minutes during a particularly spicy patrol-based defense. And, it worked great. But that all comes at the cost of it being reliable and basic, but not very high performance as compared to most of my other machine guns. My GMP is much more convenient because it auto winds and keeps up with higher rates of fire better. My PKM is the gold standard in how an airsoft gun should feed. And now I've got an A&K Mark 43, which I'll do something with. And I also have an RPK, which is just convenient if you want to run a machine gun and not even have to think about a box mag. Just run that thing off of mid caps like the Russians do in real life. Well, 45 rounders, but same difference. But in any case, there's just no replacing the cool factor. No other machine gun is this machine gun. And for me, I accept that I'm sacrificing some effectiveness for just how cool this is. But if you're wondering if it's worth $900 to have a really good airsoft machine gun, the answer is no. Buy one used, buy one from a boneyard, buy one off of a consignment wall, and then accept that you might either just be keeping it running at an okay level, or you might need to put in a lot of work to bring it running to an excellent level, but that work might be high risk because not every part you really need for this thing is easily available. And in summary, those are my thoughts on the LCT RPD. It's kinda jank, it's way overbuilt, it's really cool, and it is my favorite airsoft machine gun, despite the fact that it is objectively not that good. So if you have your own airsoft guns that are objectively not that good, that are still your favorite, go ahead and post those down in the comments below. If you think I'm being too harsh and this gun is actually really awesome, go ahead and post those down in the comments below. And if you think that I'm being too kind and this gun is the worst thing that you've ever laid eyes on, go ahead and leave that down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video from Gun Gamers. I have been Eric. I hope you enjoyed me just geeking out over another one of my favorite guns, and if you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. So thank you again for watching. Peace.